Merry Christmas! Thanks for coming to my channel. I did this today as a gingerbread house that's made out of toffee. I prefer the taste of toffee. I don't love gingerbread. And I think it turned out pretty good. I used icing sheets instead of icing, and I'll show you how I did it. So let's go. I bought these cookie cutters. It was a set on Amazon, and I just bought 2 sets and used them as molds for my toffee. Then I looked up a lot of different recipes on toffee. Most are 1-to-1 ratio of sugar and butter. It makes it English toffee because we're using butter. In this case, I had 2 cups of butter, 2 cups of sugar. This recipe also had some water and a little bit of corn syrup. On the side, you can see there is a little bit of baking soda, and there's also some vanilla. I like to use a thermometer to get to the correct temperature. Now, speaking of temperature, you're going to get to 300 degrees Fahrenheit, which is very, very hot. So I want to put in a moment to just sort of put in a warning. I would say make sure there's no kids in the kitchen, no pets in the kitchen while you're doing this. You just don't want to bump into anybody or be distracted. Once you set up, you should have all your things ready to go, and I would even buy some heat resistant gloves. The glove I'm wearing there is not heat resistant. I have oven mitts I'll use later. So anyway, that's my warning. Just be very, very careful. Read up on it, take it seriously, and we'll continue on. Now, there are differing opinions of whether or not you should stir this the whole time or let it set. I ended up stirring it because that wasn't a nonstick pan that you see there. I will note here that I did switch to smaller batches and I used a nonstick pan with a handle and about half as much ingredients, and that helped me a lot just to make sure that I was able to work quickly but safely. Here you can see I'm getting this till it's going to reach 300 degrees Fahrenheit as we said. On the left hand side you'll see I have baking soda. Oh, I just moved it out of shot. Baking soda and vanilla. When you reach 300 degrees and it turns brown like this, you're going to add those 2 ingredients, and just be warned, it's going to puff up. So you want to make sure you have a pan that's big enough. It's fine, but just be careful. It will expand. So here are those cookie cutters. I buttered them. I buttered this pan. I stopped filming here though, just for safety. I was getting in the way of the camera and I didn't have time. So I just took the toffee and poured it into those molds. It worked great. I wanted a fairly thick amount. And now we're going to make templates for our icing sheets. So I just took some cardstock, took the cookie cutters and drew around them, and then cut these pieces out so I could use them on the icing sheet, and it was pretty straightforward. You'll see some of them I cut so I could wrap the toffee. Some I didn't need to. I'll show you that in a moment, but there they are. And now let's look at our icing sheets. Ta-da! I love these so much. I think they're absolutely beautiful. There are a couple of things though. They're not inexpensive, so you want to make sure that you're using them wisely. And when you're laying out your patterns, it's like making a dress, right? You want to make as many pieces per sheet as you can. I also want to note that once you open those sealed packages, the icing sheet will dry out because it's sugar. So use them pretty quickly. I mean, now you're going to see they're pliable and it's great, but they will, lesson learned, they dry out and then you can't use them anymore. They get really crunchy. It's hard to use them. So here we go. I'm just going to cut directly onto my template. I think that was the fastest way. You just want to be careful, but see how pliable and nice they are? You just take your time so you don't rip it, and then you'll just peel it off, and then we'll go get our toffee and we're going to wrap them. So there's our toffee. It came right out of the mold. It was great. Now I have to stick that on there, and I found edible glues weren't working. So there's a box I have for when I spray glazes and when I spray glitters and things. And this edible glaze worked out perfectly. So I could put on a very thin layer, and it really helped that icing sheet to adhere, but it didn't eat into it. So you can see I just laid it on carefully and then I flattened it out. And remember, icing sheets are made of sugar, so it's not surprising that the glue was eating into it, but this glaze just held it down and it didn't make it smear. And then I just flipped it over just gently, as you can see, and then more glaze. Now you can see why I have some flaps on there, because those ends will be seen when the structure is built. So I wanted to wrap those a little bit. And there we have it. It's looking pretty good. I think it's pretty good. I did need to cut a little bit on the end to make sure it was all flat, but I just have that matte knife that I use in the kitchen, and that worked out fine. The walls, which we'll do next, honestly were the easiest because I didn't need those to be wrapped all the way around because they were going to be tucked in behind the front wall. So I just needed to add a little bit of that edible glaze. Now, the roof does need to be wrapped because you can see those eaves from all angles, really. You can see the ends. Mine's a little complicated, but you can, however you want to wrap it is fine. A little bit more of that edible glaze, and then it wraps up like a little bit of a present, and it looks really nice. Okay, so now once we have all of our pieces, ta-da, we're going to start to put them together. Now, because I'm working alone, made this little rig that would hold the walls in place so I could go hands-free. And you can see I'd used it quite a bit. I told you I had many failures on this one, so you can see that caramel there. But this worked out really well. You can put your pieces in there and then square them up. I think part of the problem every time making a gingerbread house for most of us is that, unless you have another person helping you, it's like almost impossible. So, anyway, my little rig worked really well. And now, the miracle of all miracles, the best glue I found, or edible glue, is candy melts. They worked so well. And you can see I tried to use caramel and heated sugars and things like those. But first of all, they just set up so fast and I couldn't work with them and it was a little bit scary. Whereas these candy melts, they melt down, they stay liquid for a while, but then when you put them on and you put your piece on, it sets up fast enough that you're not sitting there for hours, right? You kind of hold it together. And the other nice thing about my little rig here is that, pro tip, put your front back on and then just make sure that the structure is sort of squared up. I know that a lot of us, myself included, have made structures and then the walls are all sort of out of whack. I mean, I'm not a carpenter, but I felt like this helped it to set up properly and I could kind of see what I was doing. So I went around and held that. Like I said, I didn't have to hold it for that long, so it worked out well. Then I could just slide the front sort of to the side and pull out. It's like a puzzle. I pulled out the next piece. There you can see why I didn't need to wrap those walls as well, because they're not being exposed. They're tucked in behind the front wall. Now let's slide back on our front. And you can see it's all squared up again. And now we'll pull this out. Now this is where I got nervous because I had to put the candy melt on the, oh, I hit the camera. I did put the candy melt on the vertical ends there and I thought, oh my gosh, this isn't going to work. Ugh. But it did work. I didn't even need that much chocolate or the candy melts to adhere that front. As long as you've got a decent seal on it, it'll work out for you. And I was able to clean that up. And you can see now the one other pro tip is I went back into those corners and I added a little bit more candy melt with my finger just to make it a little bit thicker and shore up those corners. And that seemed to work really well. I was able to move around the structure. And now we're going to do the roof. I was so nervous about this that I didn't film the first half. I'm sorry about that, but I luckily have the camera on for the second half. So you can see I made a little bit more of like a scaffolding rigging there that's holding up the roof in place. And then now I'm hands-free so I can go in and I can put the candy melts on those sides. I think that's the toughest part when you're making a gingerbread house is how do you get that roof stuck on? If you're using icing, it doesn't set up fast. And it's just treacherous, honestly. So these candy melts set up fast, but I had that little scaffolding down there. So you'll see, I just want to, and I didn't even have to use that much, by the way. You don't want so much that it's dripping all over your icing sheets. So here we go. I'm going to put it on. I did want a nice seal, but that little scaffold was in the way, so I had to move it. You can see it's making it teeter-totter. So hold please. There we go. Move it out of the way. There. Now, whoop, slip. But once I got a decent seal, I kind of put that scaffold back under there. So it was giving the roof some support. The other one's got a little piece under it. And then I just let it set up for a little bit. And then I could take my hands away and let it continue to set. So that made me happy. Here's a picture from the front. I didn't love that seam, so I just put this little piece of sugar candy that I bought at the store. And now we can pull away the scaffolding and hopefully, it worked. It held in place and it has been on my workbench. It held for a few days. It will finally give way though after a few, but hopefully you'll just eat this because that's delicious toffee. Now, I made some Christmas trees out of isomalt. I love working with isomalt. Again, though, it's a product that gets super hot. I just melt it in the microwave at 20-second increments, and then I use these 3D Christmas tree molds. I'll make a short on how to use isomalt. You got to be careful with it, like you do with the toffee. But anyway, there it looks cute. Now, I realized I have edible ribbon in my stash, and so I decided to take off that little thing and make a giant bow. So there you go. That is edible and that is adorable. I'll put a link in where I got that ribbon and I'll tell you how I did it in a short, which I will post soon. But for now, I'll just show you that I thought the size was okay, maybe a little bit big, but I went back to my friend, the candy melts, for adhering it to the front. And again, that ribbon's kind of heavy, but the candy melt seems to be working quite well. It's sitting on my workbench right now. All in all, I think it came out really cute, but as I said earlier in this video, I failed so many times to get to this point. I really did. So I'm just going to cut in here and show you a couple of the other icing sheets that I used because they were really beautiful. Here they are. Aren't those gorgeous? I got them on Etsy from a team in the UK. I'll put a link below, but it was the edible glue that did me in, and then try to use the toffee itself as the glue in those corners, and that was oh. And you can see I kind of ruined the edges there, so I tried to cover them up. And that door, woof, not good. But um, I learned a lot doing it, and I think by the time I got to this iteration, it's pretty successful. So please like, subscribe, tell me in the comments if you're going to try this. Have a wonderful holiday, and I'll see you next time. Bye.